2, text number 52, contents of the Gita summarized. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text number 52. Yad te moha kalilam buddhir vyati tarishati tada gantasi nirvedam shrutavyasya shrutasya cha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Srila Prabhupada's purport. There are many good examples in the lives of the great devotees of the Lord, of those who became indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service to the Lord. First point that Srila Prabhupada is making there just brings a thought to my mind, which is that Srila Prabhupada is not saying that there's something wrong with the Vedic rituals, but that there is a higher aspect of the Vedic knowledge which is gradually revealed as one progresses on the path of devotional service. So the rituals and the ways of life prescribed in the Vedas are mainly dealing with the three modes of material nature. Earlier in this chapter, Krishna has explained that to Arjuna, that he wants him to rise above the three modes of material nature. Text number 45. Trigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistrigunya Babarjuna, Nirdvanva Mohanir Mukta. Like that. Krishna is saying, what is the, I'll just look for it, I'll just quickly get there, I think. Yes, Nir Yoga Shema Atmavan. Trigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistrigunya Babarjuna, Nirdvanvo Nitya Sattvasto, Nir Yoga Shema Atmavan. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, which is the Vedic knowledge. Krishna is saying, go beyond that. O Arjuna, although it's good, be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities, which is the material modes of nature filled with dualities, and from all anxieties or desires for gain and for safety in the material world, and be established in the self. So this is the actual purpose of the Vedas. Krishna explains that very fully in the Bhagavad Gita. So when we come to the platform of devotional service, then everything is achieved. And Srila Prabhupada will explain more on this purport. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities, even though an experienced Brahmana. So again, I'll just try and pursue this point that everything has its proper place. When a person factually, and that's a very important point, factually understands Krishna, we may aspire to understand Krishna, we may have some relationship with Krishna and his relationship with Krishna. He naturally, Naturally, if you factually understand Krishna and your relationship with Krishna, we can become completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities. Now, again, this is a very exalted position. Krishna is speaking about the Vedas. This is very exalted, especially in light of the modern time that we live in and exist in the Kali Yuga. Someone who's actually following the Vedic rituals is very exalted, especially comparatively to what we're experiencing now. Uh, so even though an experienced Brahmana, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities. And then Srila Prabhupada continues, Sri Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and acharya in the line of the devotees, says, Sandhya Vandana Bhadram Ashtu Bhavato Bhoshnana Tubhyam Namo Bodheva Pitrascha Tarpana Vidho Naham Shamaha Shamyatam Yatra Kvapi Nishadya Yadava Kulo Tamasya Kamshadvisha Shmaram Smaram Agham Harim sorry Shmaram Agham Harami Tad Alam Manyakim Anyena Me. Translation of that statement of Srila Madhavendra Puri. He says, O Lord, in my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you. Bathing, I offer my obeisances unto you. O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kansa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me. End quote. Srila Prabhupada continuing, the Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes. So here Srila Prabhupada's making that very clear. The Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for the neophytes. And we would be well advised to include ourselves in that category of being neophyte. It's the very beginning. Our devotional life may have begun a few years ago or a few decades ago, but in the big spectrum of thing, we are very neophyte. Although we've connected to this completely transcendental line, which is an amazing opportunity for us. So again, the Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes. Semicolon. Comprehending all kinds of prayer 3 times a day. So that's understanding all kinds of prayers, like the Gayatri mantra is recited at least 3 times a day. Taking a bath early in the morning. Offering respects to the forefathers, etc. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he has already attained perfection. If one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he has no longer to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in revealed scriptures. And similarly, if one has not understood that the purpose of the Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engages in the rituals, etc., then he is uselessly wasting time in such engagements. Persons in Krishna consciousness transcend the limit of Sabda Brahma, or the range of the Vedas and Upanishads. Om Magana Timirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Grave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual master is forcing me to open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto his lotus feet. Let's read the verse once more. Translation. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion. So this is an important statement Krishna is making. This forest of illusion is very dense. The living entity in Srimad Bhagavatam is described as entering into the forest of material enjoyment. He thinks that here is a place for enjoyment. That's why we come to the material world and we enter into the forest. But here it's being explained this forest of material enjoyment is a world of delusion. We become deluded and take on so many misconceptions, thinking ourselves to be a part of this whole manifestation of delusion in the material world. So we have to learn to become indifferent to everything in the forest of material delusion. And that can be done by the Vedas. So the Vedic literatures are meant to gradually bring us from this desire of wanting to enjoy in the material world by the regulative processes of Vedic rituals, etc. One can elevate oneself. So that's the whole idea of human society, is elevation. And then if we're a little more inquisitive, we'll try to understand, rather than just performing pious activities so that we will get a good result from our activities of piety, then which will elevate us in this life to a certain degree, and in the next life to heavenly planets and so on, as described very elaborately in the Vedic literatures. Then if one is fortunate, he gets a sense of something more through the study of Vedic way of life. The Vedas and the Upanishads. The Upanishads we've discussed many times are different verses that are sprinkled throughout the four Vedas, and they give us an introduction to the idea of transcendence, so that dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and then the desire for liberation is there. So this is the gradual process. And then Srila Prabhupada explained that why take the stairway to rise in the multi-story building if there is an elevator available? So this is the process of Krishna consciousness. Is a very direct method. Throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we'll see so many aspects of spiritual involvement are prescribed, or should we say explained and described. Then ultimately we know in the at the end of the sixth chapter, Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatin antarapana shadavan bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. He says that of all yogis, all transcendentalists, that person who's most intimately united with me in yoga and is the most intimately united and is the highest of all yogis. And then he goes on to explain, just hear from me how by practicing this bhakti yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So this is the path that Krishna recommends. That is the mercy of Krishna, and that is the mercy of the representatives of Krishna, that instead of giving us flattering words which will allow us to stay in the material world and perform a few pious activities and follow some rituals, etc., which are meritorious very much. We have to see that. It's not that one should just think this is although it's explained by Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam says, Shrama eva kevalam, all occupational activities are certainly meant for liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. And the activities a person performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for hearing the messages of Vasudeva, because only by hearing the messages of Vasudeva about the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, can we extricate ourselves from this dense forest of material delusion. So that's the transformative Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a quantum leap in consciousness, whereas the following of the Vedic rules and regulations is a very gradual process that may take many, many births. Krishna also says elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita that after many births, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's Bahunam Jamanam Te Ganavam Mam Prapadyante Vasudeva Sarvamati Samahatma Sadurlabaha. Such a great soul is very rare. Why? Because we come to the material world with this strong desire to want to be independently functioning without the Lord. And so it's not, we're not here because we want to know Krishna. We're here because we want to forget Krishna and live independently. But we hear that actually we are dependent upon the Lord. And the more we analyze this, the more it becomes understood and experienced that actually we are dependent on the supreme living entity. Nicho Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam. That of all living entities, there is one supreme living entity who is providing all the necessities of all the dependent living entities. So we don't like to hear that very much. We in conditioned consciousness. But that's the reality as distinguished from the illusion. It's not that every living being is independently functioning. And Krishna tries, and he, how should we say, he tries to help us, and he does it in such a wonderful way that he explains everything very elaborately and helps us to come to this realization of our actual position. And then we're hearing here from Srila Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and acharya in the line of the devotees. He's explaining that now that I have, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna. So this is what the acharyas are encouraging us to do. Learn this process. It is available that we can learn how to remember the Lord and his great qualities, names, forms, pastimes, and paraphernalia, his devotees. By this process, Krishna is saying, Manmana bhava mad bhakto majajimam namaskuru. Mami Vaishase Satyam Te Priti Jane Priyosimi. Always think of me, become my devotee, bow down and worship me. Thus you will come to me. I promise you this, because I'm your very dear friend. You've forgotten that. I'm providing everything for you now, and I will provide everything for you eternally in whatever species or state of life you may find yourself in. It is I who am providing everything. But if you're able to hear me, Tatsrinu, just hear from me how by practicing this process of yoga, you can know me in full, free from doubt. Uh, and then you can come out of this dense darkness, which is a pitiful place. It's not a happy place, the material existence. We search for it, we desire it so strongly, and we have great expectation. But the reality is quite different. That's why it's been mentioned, delusion. We're deluded into thinking that we can be here in this world and continue to exist and to gain the pleasures of life. Along with the so-called pleasures of life are the concomitant problems of life. It's the package that you get, because um, that's the way it is. That's the structure of the material world. It's not full of eternality, bliss, and knowledge, but it's full of the threefold miseries of material life. So Krishna is trying to help us understand this. And normally it will take quite a long time, as we've just mentioned, and Krishna mentions. And I think I mentioned last week when I was speaking that this, again, the mercy of Krishna is very perceivable if we look. He encourages us in Bhagavad Gita, and then in the Srimad Bhagavatam in a similar way, he says that please just absorb yourself fully in me. And then he says, if you can't absorb yourself fully in me, then there's a process you can follow these principles of bhakti yoga, and follow these rules and regulations. He says, if you can't do that, if you feel you're not able to, can't do, won't do, don't want to, whatever, then he says, just utilize your intelligence. And if you don't do that, then utilize your wealth. If you can't do that, do something good. Make a start. Just, yeah, make a start on this path. And Krishna will give you the beginning. And he'll reward you according to your surrender, whatever way you can begin the process. It's called lowering the rope. I've used this example before too, like in what do they call it, water world, or the places where you go, they for seeing the whales jumping and so on. They I can't remember the name, whatever the name of the place is, but you go there and you can sit down and these whales jump out of the big, large swimming pool arena. And everyone's, oh, look at this magnificent creature. And it's explained that to get those creatures to do that, there's a process. And the process is quite interesting because the process is that they have to train them very gradually. It's a very gradual process. They don't all of a sudden jump out and leap into the air 20, 30, 40 feet high and splash down. No. And the process begins, you would think, from the top of the water, that the whales would be asked to kind of start jumping from being on the top like that. No, it doesn't begin there. It begins on the bottom of the whole pool. So this is shown that they have a rope, and they lower the rope to the very bottom of the pool, and they entice the whale to swim across this rope, and it's not a big thing, and then they get some treat, they get some benefit from doing that, and then gradually they raise the rope off the bottom of the pool, and the whale will go up and over and up and over, gradually, and always getting some taste getting a taste as they go across, until eventually one day they are able to take the rope to the top of the water, and the whale will continue the process. So Krishna uses that process. If you can't jump high in the air, it lowers the rope so that we cannot fail practically unless we're a complete demon. And even he's very kind to the demons. If you become a complete demon and a big demon, then Krishna, he says, oh, enough. I'll just finish you off, Kamsa. And such personalities that are mentioned here. I think I'm trying to find them, but they were mentioned. In Madhavendra Puri's verses there, yes, Kamsa, and who was that? Ravan, I think it was, like that. So, and it was very nice to read the other week in the first and second canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna does the same thing. He describes the universal form, and we think, oh, we don't need the universal form. And again, now I'm switching to being, quote unquote, an aspiring devotee. We can sometimes think, oh, there's nothing for me to learn in the first and second canto because it's talking about the super soul. We're all about Bhagavan Krishna. We're all about the personality of Godhead. So I don't need to understand much about the super soul. directing the wanderings of everyone from within the heart, and so on. And what to speak of first canto, we were hearing about the universal form of the Lord. Because we're not so interested. Arjuna wasn't interested. He said, look, my Lord, I thought I was a bit interested, but let's forget this universal form. I only want to see your two-handed form. And that way I'm very happy. His relationship as a friend, that was more for Arjuna. And we think, yes, well, I'm a devotee, so I don't need to know much about that universal form. But Krishna, but let me go to the acharyas. So the acharyas say, no, we must learn to see that Krishna is so. Why are we reading that? Because Krishna is so merciful that he makes himself available to help someone to begin to get some idea of Krishna's universal form, that nothing is separate from Krishna. Krishna says also in Bhagavad Gita, when you have thus learned the truth by approaching a spiritual master and inquiring submissively and rendering service, that's all the process. When you have learned the truth from such a self-realized soul, you will realize that all beings are in me, are part of me, and are mine. There's nothing separate from me. So that's what's to be understood. And then again in the Bhagavatam, he's saying same thing. He's saying, try to begin the process by seeing that I'm there in every flower. I'm there in every particle. I'm smaller than the smallest. I'm greater than the greatest. So we learn to see, and that's the beginning process. And then again, then he goes to super soul within, Paramatma. So this is the gradual process. And again, the acharyas and Srila Prabhupada's writing in Srimad Bhagavatam and here in Bhagavad Gita, quoting the statements of the acharyas, they're saying that the bona fide Vaishnavas, they relish everything about Krishna. They relish his impersonal feature in universal form. They relish his localized aspect, his super soul within the heart of every living being. They like to hear all about why, because it brings us closer to the greatness of the Lord and closer to the compassion of the Lord to extend himself in any feature that the living entity can get a foothold, can get a beginning in the process of coming back home, back to Godhead. That is the idea. So we have a strong tendency, I have a strong tendency, let's speak in the first person, to get ahead of myself, thinking that I'm making great progress on this process of Krishna Bhakti, but only if we are developing the actual qualities of the Krishna Bhakta. And what are those qualities? Trinadapi sinichena taroriva sahishnana amanina manadina kirtaniya sadahari. Again, it's easy to say these verses, but to actually live them, that we're actually thinking ourselves to be lower than the straw in the street. We were just reciting Bhaktivinoda Thakur's wonderful bhajans, and he's saying that he's weeping and weeping, that he's so fallen and has no attraction. And then we've said many times, we've heard it, that we should weep, that we can't weep. When we look to see, are we actually weeping due to our inability, due to our lust, anger, and greed, our madness, our illusions, our envy, and we're not. So it's a real problem, because a real devotee is actually weeping. So we have to, pinch ourselves. Hey, come back. Am I free from these tendencies? The advanced devotees are free, as Rupa Goswami explains in his Nectar of Instruction. He says that we should have respect for all devotees. Anyone who chants Hare Krishna, we should, in the mind, we should respect. Anyone who's undergone spiritual initiation and is engaged in worshiping the Supreme Lord through the processes of devotional service, we should offer humble obeisances to those devotees. And we should associate with and faithfully serve those advanced devotees who are advanced on the path of devotional service and whose hearts are completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So this is one of the most important points of a devotee, devoid of the propensity to criticize others. So that is not an easy thing. It's so easy to think that it's the right thing to do to see the faults in others. No, that's not saying that Srila Prabhupada says we should call a spade a spade if it's obvious that there's some deviation and some horrific activity. It should be pointed out, but in a general process, we should. I remember Mahavishnu Maharaj. He said, often we do that. He said, sometimes we don't know anyone and we're introduced to someone, and immediately we're thinking, "Oh, I don't like the way I don't like the way he wears his kurta. I don't like the way he shaves his head or doesn't shave his head." Or our tendencies to be very much inclined to find the fault. So this is conditioned life. So. Obviously, here Madhavendra Puri is explaining his situation, and that we'll discuss a little bit more in a few minutes. Right now, I'm just trying to focus on or my position that uh, mm, mm, I'm reminded again of some seminars that I used to present on the Grihastha ashram, and it was talking about how to become a pure devotee, and we can quote verses where Krishna says that you you I'm trying to remember those verses, just dropped out. There's different verses where Krishna is explaining this process. Yeah, just like Vasudeva Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Jnana Yatyasu Vairagyam, Jnanam Chaya Rohitakam, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Vasudev. We think we know it. Vasudev, we know Vasudev, he's everywhere, that's Krishna, etc. We develop causeless knowledge and detachment from the world by serving the personality of Godhead. So hey, I'm engaged in devotional service, been doing it for a few decades now. So it must be that I've got causeless, I'm got knowledge and detachment from the world. But how detached, how much knowledge do we actually have? And how am I behaving? Um, how am I behaving as a human being? Because if we actually have this real knowledge of Vasudev, if we have real detachment from the world, it will be it will be manifest in a certain way, which is as a devotee, as a Vaishnava, which will be perceptible by those who know us and see us. Um, and they will see the real qualities of devotionals, of a real devotee manifest if we're, by serving Vasudeva, we are developing this causeless knowledge and detachment. It's a gift from Krishna. It's not something that we can gain by our endeavors, by our study of Shastra, by our performance of austerities, by our accepting a certain position in life, be it sannyas or vanaprastha or I'm paka or grihastha, whatever I, upadi we place upon ourselves. Mm. The quality has to come through. So this is the most important point I would suggest in this, well, one of the most important points in this verse is that we have to check in and see, are we able to speak the words of Srila Madhavendra Puri and be able to say, well, I've got no debt to repay to the forefathers, to the demigods. I don't have to chant Gayatri mantras, really. I do it, but actually I'm beyond all of this, really. I am transcendental. I am a quote unquote a devotee. So the example that is given often is that if we have $1 million, it will be seen that you will have 100,000 and all the other monetary quantities within the $1 million. Similarly, if we have real Krishna consciousness, then it should be manifest that we possess many good qualities like Titiksha, Karunika, Sari. All the different qualities are there. Titikshava Karunika, Surida Sarvadehina, Ajita, Shatrava, Shanta, Sarva, Sadhu, Bhushana, and the other 26 qualities of the devotee. We should be soft hearted, we should be forgiving, we should be kind, we should be humble, and the various qualities of a devotee. So that should be manifesting. And again, I've mentioned many times, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he gives us the, the way of a devotee, especially an aspiring devotee. He says he should always be introspective and seeing, how am I appearing in life? Have I actually got any good qualification? And how am I manifesting that in a proud way? Then that's my disqualification. If you have any qualification, and if it's manifesting in that way, it's not actually a qualification, it's a disqualification. How is my false ego propelling me to act in various ways? So this is called introspection, and it serves as well, actually. And yeah. So the Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes. So that's Prabhupada's, all these different things. And Srila Prabhupada's encouraging, so encouraging right from the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, that this process is there, the process of bhakti yoga, and it is available to all of us, which is the absolute mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, coming in his form as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, delivering, bestowing upon us that which no other incarnation has previously bestowed. So it's absolute mercy for us, but it's required that we do the work. We have work. The work has to be done. Then Krishna says he will reveal himself proportionate to the work. And what is the work? Yeah, well, that's a big subject. The whole Bhagavad Gita is giving us the work, and fortunately, Srila Prabhupada's purports are giving us the explanation of how to do that work, to become purified through the process of bhakti yoga, so that we can come to this actual platform of devotional service. So, Tivrena Bhakti Yogena, the intensive practice of devotional service. So somehow or other, whatever our situation, we have to gradually mold it in such a way that we cannot forget Krishna. We are able to think of Krishna 24 hours a day. So the great acharyas in previous ages and the great devotees, they would perform great austerity, and fully, so much renunciation, so much cultivation of knowledge, etc., etc., etc. So we have our work to do, and that means that even though we're very fallen, very lowly, we must continue the process. Last night we were just talking on that subject a little bit too. That in the 11th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, the very famous verses there, it says that um, what is that? Trying to remember. It's 11th canto. It's chapter. It's text. Is 20. It's 20 chapter. I think it's 20 chapter. Oh gosh, 11th canto, chapter 20, text 27 and 28. Trying to remember the beginning of the first word of the verses. That no, it won't come. But that's it. Basically, there, Krishna is explaining that even having awakened faith in the narration of my glories, being disgusted with all material activity, knowing that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, yet still being unable to renounce all sense gratification. So, what a position. We've got attraction for hearing about this, but and we know that the material world is a miserable place, and sense gratification always results in a miserable place, but not having the capacity, the power, the purity to give up and renounce all sense gratification. Then Krishna says, my devotees should remain happy in the process of devotional service and continue worshiping me with great faith and conviction, even though sometimes he may uh, not be able to renounce all sense gratification. He should remain engaged in the process and should, at the end of those verses, I'm trying to think I could find them. The Sanskrit words are there, but it says one should be regretful, a little remorseful. One has to be a little repentant that one may not be as advanced as we may have thought ourselves to be. So one should repent, be repentful. That's the mood, the internal mood of a devotee, is that if there's some shortcoming, that we actually a little repentant, that actually I have some still attraction for this material world, not to beat ourselves up, not to be quote unquote guilt ridden and think, well, let me give up the process. This process is useless. I can't do it, or it might be good or it might not, but I can't do it. I'm so fallen, etc. This is Maya's trick. And Krishna is saying to um, Uddhava in that 11th canto that no, my devotee should remain happy as a devotee, not happy that they may have committed some mistake or misnomer, mis- misdeed, but that they remain happy that they have this opportunity for Krishna consciousness, and they continue the process with great faith and determination and be a little repentful. When Krishna sees that, he's known as Bhavagrahi Janardhan. He's known as the personality who knows the intention of the heart of the devotee. So if we can cultivate just that little bit of sincerity, that I know all what I should do, but I may be not so expert, so pure in heart, and therefore I regret that. And when Krishna sees that, then he will reciprocate. He will see this is this devotee. And remember, we spoke earlier about the rope being lowered. Krishna says, you've got a little bit of sincerity. Keep going, keep going. Continue. Uh, don't give up. And I will reveal myself to you accordingly to your surrender to me. And gradually keep going. Don't get ahead of yourself. Uh, don't get too far ahead. That's the tendency. It's called the mode of passion. The mode of passion, we want it. And that's the modern time. We want everything instantly. So we come to Krishna consciousness, we want it. Yes, oh, great. Freedom from this. Go back home, back to Godhead. Yep. Okay, what did I do? Chant Hare Krishna. Okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And we chant and we go on. And then we expect to come to prema very quickly. Right, I've been around here for 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years, whatever long it's been. And we want it. And then we have some difficulty on the path. And then we pick ourselves up. And before you know it, we're thinking we're up there again. And Krishna's really kind because he says, okay, another lesson, you need to learn more. Don't become proud, don't become arrogant, don't become whatever impurity comes upon us. And often we make a joke about that we're looking forward to prasadam, and guess what's on the plate for the bhakta? For the bhakta, there's humble pie. Humble pie is on the menu again. And you think, oh, gee, I thought I'd eaten enough humble pie. Now it's time for something else. But guess what? Devotees get addicted to humble pie because humble pie, ki jai, it's the best diet. Isn't it? The best diet's humble pie. You got, but But again, it's like that jaundice, you know, the example Srila Prabhupada gives, that if you want to cure the jaundice, the sugar candy. So the sugar candy is the cure for jaundice. But when we have what's it called? What is the disease called? Hepatitis C, I think they call it, whatever. Jaundice. When you've got a jaundice condition, then even the sugar tastes bitter. Huh? So we don't like to take it, but by taking it, gradually, the disease is cured and one starts to relish the taste. In a similar way, humble pie is like that. It's like, wow, I don't know if I like this humble pie stuff. But if you keep taking the humble pie, you will get to the point where you're able to say ki jai, that yes, humble pie ki jai. This is the real medicine. It's actually the diet. Huh? And the medicine is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So many analogies are there given so kindly by our great acharyas to help us to see our totally lamentable condition. But we're not supposed to lament. We're supposed to become inspired. We're supposed to become, Prabhupada said, if you're going to lament, then you can be morose like that, then you should go into a cupboard. But still, as we're saying that, we have to be reflective and be able to lament our fallen condition, but not to stay in that condition, but to gain inspiration from Krishna's kindness, from the words of the acharyas. Um, how nice. Srila Madhavendra Puri, he says it in all humility. That's what's so beautiful. He says, oh, O Lord, in my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you. So he makes that statement. I think it's my limited capacity for understanding. That's okay. In my prayers 3 times, all glory to you, my Lord. Okay. Bathing, I offer my obeisances unto you. Okay. O demigods, an exclamation is it's written in this way as an O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, so I've got my devotion is there for the Supreme Lord, and while bathing, I offer my obeisance unto the Lord. But the demigods and the forefathers, he's not saying this out of pride. He says, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great transcendent of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa. So he's bringing it into the pastimes of the Lord, relationship with the Yadu dynasty, his intimate dealings with the Yadus, and how he's killing of the King Kamsa. And thereby, I can free myself from all sinful bondage. Wow. I think this is sufficient for me. So it's just blatant humility. He's just saying, hey, demigods, I can't really spend much time because I'm onto such a good thing here. I'm really fully connected to Lord Krishna, the king of the Yadu dynasty, or the lord of the Yadu dynasty, etc. So we should not imitate, but we should follow in the footsteps. There's a vast difference following in the footsteps and imitation. So we are not supposed to imitate, but follow in the footsteps. So I think I've covered a little bit of this subject matter. I hope it's been somewhat relevant and connected to Srila Prabhupada's purport and his translation of this verse. Once more, the translation. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. So, vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kuranandana bahushakayanantasya buddhayo vyavasayana. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. So this is the whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita, to come from the Bahushaka, the many branched intelligence, to come to the one pointed intelligence, to focus on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to take hold of those lotus feet, or the lotus feet of the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and make that the only goal of life. That is our only shelter. That is our only goal, is to more and more come to the lotus feet of the Lord. So if anyone has any comments, please feel free to put the comment there. Could be, again, I'm often guilty of not making that point at the beginning, but anyway, it can be made any time, really. That if you have some reflection, maybe something that is there in the purport and the verse, or anything I've been saying that piques your thoughts, and you think, yes, that was good, that you heard something that Prabhupada said, or and you can share that. It's actually quite helpful. In fact, very helpful. Pardon me. So those comments could be made later on also if you hear. If sometimes you're not able to hear until later on in the day or days. Feel free to make some comment. It will be well received. Okay, we're going to finish at that point. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All the aspiring servants of Srila Prabhupada and the great acharyas and the Supreme Personality of Godhead Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.